Hey, what's up? It's Phoenix. Welcome to my channel. I'm a little bit surprised because the process of writing and creating art and music and thinking and even visual arts that I've been able to experience throughout life, they are often counterintuitive. So, for instance, I might think intuition is more valuable in the creative process, but then in counter arguments that talk about the technical side, I might think that the purpose of a piece of writing is for its emotion, and realize the counter argument that it's actually more about the logical expressions or the creativity or the intellectual considerations, or the idea that art isn't about education but is actually more about changing perceptions and thinking about perceptions in general. And there's so many examples I could use where I realized that my art is very counterintuitive, partly because most of what I've heard about my practice is that it is counterintuitive, what I've heard, and what I've realized that I could be doing but am not doing. And one of the most, probably my sacred cow, you could say, one of my most sacred cows, is that of self-expression, where you get this idea that art isn't about self-expression, it's more about the encountering differences and encountering things that are separate from you. And yet I look at my pieces of writing and I realize that so much of it is about expression. I know that music is very technical. I know that music requires a certain proficiency with your instruments, and I know that it requires a certain precision, and there are certain forms you use to kind of organize it, and that rhythms matter, and that the way that you place the notes matters, and the way that you use the notes, the way that you use the instruments. But I want to be stubborn, and I want to say that even in something as technical as music, of course it's not the technical elements, of course it's the emotion and what we want to communicate, but even more than that, of course it's the self-expression. And I really struggle because I've heard a lot of the counterintuitive arguments that go against the grain or my grain, where it feels as though art actually isn't about self-expression at all. It's not about communicating those things. But that's what I'm doing anyway. And I want to defend it a little bit, because even though it's a little bit unexpected, I think it's important. I think it's important because art, sure, maybe art isn't as interesting as avant-garde art. Art written with a more emotional appeal is not really avant-garde, because the assumptions are that so much of it is supposed to be about the way in which you do it rather than what you're actually saying. But I realize I care about content, and I think even though my emotions might be sentimental and they might be intense, I want to express them, and even more, I want to express my whole being. And I think it's interesting because it's actually a very unpopular notion in the artistic realms. Art isn't about self-expression. It's either about the technical elements, or it's about the way in which you actually approach it rather than what you're saying. And it's actually not about this singular personality that you have as an artist, which is where I come from, and about your emotions and your experiences in life, but is more about the form. And while I think that there's definitely a place for thinking about form, for instance, poetry is very much about how you use the words rather than the words that you're actually using or what the words are saying. And yet I would even say, even if the poetry might not be as good, it might not be as edgy, I care about the self-expression. And I care about the self-expression because there's something I'm trying to communicate with my thoughts and my feelings and my experiences that I want to be a totality of my experience and a totality of who I am. And that I breathe that into my art because that's what's important to me. And I can understand that people would say maybe the art isn't as interesting because they're too focused on they call it the lyrical eye. For instance, in poetry, where it's like you're only writing as an I speaker, and that's very limiting to what you can do. And I've been in tension with this throughout the years because I've really thought about this and really tried to own in on it. And what I realized is, like, I still have things I want to express, and those things fall outside of more artistic or edgy or experimental means of communicating. But I actually like that. And it might be that I'm limited in what I can do as an artist because I am so focused on that expression. But the self-expression is supposed to inspire other people to express themselves. I want my self-expression to help people to be able to tap into their own expressions and being able to communicate what's important to them. I want them to have that opportunity to see what matters to them and what they want to communicate and what means something to them, what their worldview indicates. And I've actually been surprised at how counterintuitive a lot of the advice I've heard is, because it makes me do a double take. It makes me think more about my approach. But I would still say at the end of the day, I might double down and say it's still about the communication of that self-expression, because you are breathing life into the world and into your art. And sure, it may not be as logical as you would think it would be, or as it's supposed to be. Sure, it wouldn't be as outside of the box, because self-expression is often seen as being more simple and linear. But I realize maybe that's not always important to me. Maybe even though I care about thinking about artistic form in the variety of mediums that I work in, but at the same time, it's like, this is me. This is what I have. And I don't do it just to talk about the iSpeaker or just to reference that iSpeaker. I do it because I'm trying to convey a whole world. I'm trying to convey a whole way of thinking. And I think about it because in my work, I present ideas, but I don't present them because I think that they're the only way of looking at things. I don't present them because I think it's the only truth that there is. I present them because I say, this is possible, this is here, and you get to decide what you do with it. And I would say that my self-expressions are the same things. I see my art as being a generous gift to humanity. Whether people see it that way or not, in a more cynical, that's another thing. But I see it as being my whole being, and this is my gift, and this is what I bring to the world. And the expression may not be for everybody, and it may not appeal to most people, but I love the creativity and the thought and the detail that goes into a good expressive communication, because then you feel like you can empathize, you feel like you can connect, you feel like you can understand something from someone else's point of view. And I just get really excited about the expressions. I get really excited about what I can communicate through my words and what I can try to represent. And it gives me a lot of hope. So I can definitely understand that people have different approaches to art, and that you should challenge yourself and you should try to do things that are counterintuitive to you. But on the other hand, coming from someone who definitely wrestles with the ambiguity and wrestles with the counterintuitive notions, at the end of the day, I still think it's about self-expression, because I think it's important to be able to communicate something. And I think that there's value in what you're able to communicate. And again, maybe that won't be for everybody, but hopefully it can appeal to some people and they can see a richer perspective. Not because it's your perspective, but because they've seen that perspective can exist for them. And that's the freedom in it, I think, is this idea that people can communicate what they need to communicate in a way that is freeing to them. And that's the most cathartic element of writing, is that you are composing something that is from your point of view, but that other people can relate to and learn about their own point of view and be able to tap into that for themselves. So yeah, I'm Phoenix. I definitely always think about these things, and I double down, because I think that expression is just such a beautiful thing, and when we're able to convey such rich worlds, I think that that's what makes the world even richer, is these different perspectives that we see. And I think it makes the world wonderful, and we find fulfillment in it. So yeah, that's my approach. Take it or leave it. I'm Phoenix. Thank you for watching, and I will see you next time.